coming up on Wrestling Life.
There was so much on the line. It could have been awful. It could have been humiliating. It was a worldwide audience. It's in the UK where everybody is cheering for Davey Boy. It could have gone just horribly wrong, and it could not have gone better.
This is Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, the show that celebrates wrestling's past, present, and future with real talk from real talent.
Welcome, my friends, to another edition of Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, your go-to destination for real talk from real talent. Joining me on the show today is an extremely special guest whose voice was central to so many iconic World Wrestling Federation moments during the late 80s and early 90s. And he's continued in recent years to make a valuable contribution to the industry in conversation with many of wrestling's legends through his Primetime podcast and more recently as part of the NWA broadcast team. He's about to pay a visit to the UK as part of the annual For the Love of Wrestling extravaganza, and it's my privilege to welcome him to the show today. Joining me in the Wrestling Live studio today is, of course, the one, the only, it is Mr. Sean Mooney. Sean, welcome to the show. How are you?
Well, thanks for having me, Ben. How are you across the pond? I'm really looking forward to coming over and seeing everybody, and I love the title of your show, Wrestling Life, because I think that everything is related to wrestling. It taught me everything about life that I needed to know and has stayed with me all these decades since.
Yeah, and for those of us that are fans or involved in the industry, I mean, it is an all-consuming beast, wrestling, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, and every life is related. Yeah, everybody's got a gimmick, Ben. You know that. Everybody's got their shtick, right? So,
and also, as my wife says to me, she's like, any time that I've kind of zoned out or I'm not paying attention to her, she's like, "You're thinking about wrestling, aren't you? You're thinking about some obscure bit of wrestling trivia." No, of course I'm not. Of course I'm not.
Caught me again.
So we were saying off air, you come back to the UK and going to make a little trip of it whilst you're here. But the last time you were here was SummerSlam 1992. Is that right?
Yeah, it has been a very long time. It really is amazing that it has been that many years. It goes by in a blink, but my memories of the times I did go to the UK, because I did make a few trips there, are still very fond in my brain. And it was a love affair started back then with the fans in the United Kingdom, because I was one of the first people who started customizing markets over there when when the WWF at the time, of course, it's the WWE as we know it today, but the United Kingdom was really the new international frontier for them. That was one of the first places that we went. And of course, now it is indeed worldwide. But back then, the UK was the place where we really started it. And I remember Sky Television. We started doing that, and of course, all the Coliseum home videos. And I didn't realize till I got over there how limited the opportunity for people to really see the product, because I think Sky Television was a subscription at the time. It was one of those
really expensive.
Yeah, and so people would basically go to the video stores to get our Coliseum home videos. Mm-hmm. So, and Lord Alfred Hayes and I, of course, we did a majority of the matches on those because they wanted to have different voices, different teams doing the voices for the stuff that went overseas. Yeah. And I didn't even realize at the time how well Alfred and I were known until we went over there for a couple of trips. We went over for one when we did the event at Royal Albert Hall.
Yes.
And then, of course, SummerSlam. And we just had a blast. They embraced us. I was blown away. I've told people that, I was known here in the United States because I appeared in pretty much every single product we had. Superstars, Challenge, Spotlight, everything, and with the event center. But I didn't realize the impact because a lot of people didn't see me doing play-by-play over here or anything. And I was the backstage stick guy for the interviews. That was pretty much my role here. But over there, we're doing everything. So when we went over, I was just blown away that people wanted to meet me and say hello, and it was crazy. But I still to this day hear from people from the United Kingdom. I get mail, and I left the World Wrestling Federation in 1993, so it's been a long time. But I'll still get a couple of pieces of mail every month, and a lot of them will come from the UK. And they have the baseball cards that we had. I never had an action figure back then. Things have changed, as you can see over my shoulder, finally. And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
But they'll send these, the Topps cards we had. I get a lot of those, and, people track me down. I'm a newsreader here. And so they track me down. They'll send them to the station I'm at. And I figure they take the time to do that. I sign them and I send them off. And it's been really wonderful.
I think, yeah, I mean, the thing is, you're obviously, you left in 1993, but you were there for such a seminal time for WWF's explosion. And so there are so many people like me who are now in our late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, who probably should be spending our money on our children's toys and not toys for ourselves. But the reality is,
it becomes a point. Then you're collectors, right? It's not,
now, yeah.
but there's still toys. I'm sorry.
My wife, when she says about buying more dollies, I'm like, no.
Yeah, I have to be very careful.
But I mean, you were such a pivotal part, and as you say, Coliseum Home Video was that lifeline for how we were able to watch wrestling. I used to go down to I had two routes to the WWF. I either went to my friend's house who had Sky TV, and once a week they would record me Superstars, or later my hour of Raw, and I'd take my VHS back the next week and they'd record it again. Or I had a friend who owned a local video store, and he had all the WrestleManias, but he also had all of the Coliseum Home Video compilation videos, of which you played a very big part. So between you and Lord Alfred Hayes, you two were the voices of my early, wrestling fandom. And I thank you for that, because here I am 30 odd years later, still doing this and still loving it. But still, I have such fond memories for 91, 92, 93. That period is very special.
Yeah. And Ben, it took me a while to really understand it, that I always thought, well, I was just an announcer. I didn't really understand why people connected me to that. I thought everybody would just remember the superstars. But I came to the realization that it was like being on a show that everybody loved, and you were one of the players on that show, one of the actors or whatever you want to call it on there. And it was such a wonderful time in the world of professional wrestling and what the product that was being presented back then. And it had gone mainstream, really. And it was such a fun time, especially for young people. And they identify those times with the World Wrestling Federation, the WWE, and its connection to friends, its connection that they had with their dad, that they'd be able to go to a live event together, or be able, it was a communication, it was a connection between the two of them. They could talk, maybe they couldn't talk about anything else, but they could certainly talk about the Hulkster and the Warrior and and everybody else that was part of that wonderful time. And it was such a special era. It's never, ever been matched, and will never be matched again. And there certainly have been great periods of time in professional wrestling. The Attitude Era was certainly another time I thought was great for the WWE. But it's just the fact that that's when it all started, and it was just a golden time, and just kept getting better and better. That wave just kept cresting and just kept going and going. And I was privileged to have been lucky enough to have been brought in and been allowed to be a part of it. And I have never forgotten that. I have such great gratitude for that opportunity that Vince McMahon gave me so long ago. Yeah.
So how does that come about then? Because you joined in 1988. Your debut is SummerSlam 1988, I believe. Did you have to? I've spoken to Lillian Garcia, who's told me about the horror stories of her auditions, where she had to sell a roll of tape in 60 seconds.
Me, it was the broom.
You have the broom.
It was the broom, yes. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard that story.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But he just likes to put you on the spot and just see what you can do under pressure.
Yeah. Well, that's because a lot of what you do is, live. It's ad-libbed, it's improv, it's everything can change in a second. You're dealing with a lot of different personalities, and yeah, you have to be able to think on your feet. Gene Okerlund was a master at that. I learned so much from him of how to recover, how to get back to the subject matter, how to add a little humor to it. I knew I could never be Gene, but I learned techniques from him that helped me with what my persona was. And and so when you got that chance to audition, they threw all kinds of stuff, and you go in there not having a clue what they're going to have you do stuff where they had you call a play-by-play match. They have you do a sample, tell people when an event is coming up. And I remember the broom, and Bruce Pritchard was there at the audition, and he did the whole thing. Here's the broom, sell it to me. So whatever I did caught Vince's eye and his ear or whatever. But a couple weeks after I had gone up there, I was living in New York City at the time because I was working for Major League Baseball Productions in New York. That's what got me back to New York City, and took the train up and did the audition. I was a producer at the time and also did things on camera for the company. But I did not have a whole lot of experience as a talent. And so whatever Vince McMahon saw, because I've said it more than once, when I first went to work for them, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I did not know a great deal about professional wrestling. I didn't grow up with it. I had worked in sports television. So I looked at it from that viewpoint. My whole take on it was, I'm going to make this as a legitimate sporting event, entertainment. And I knew it back then. That was the key to making it presentable to people. And it was going to lead to my success. I had to be different. I didn't look at other announcers. Like I said, Gene for the technique of doing stuff, but I knew I couldn't be who Gene Okerlund was. I couldn't be Gordon Soley. I couldn't be these people. I had to be my own personality. But I looked at it from a sportscaster's view, a network sportscaster's view. Bob Costas was, very popular back then. So was Jim Lampley, that type of, and I felt if I could add that legitimacy, then it would only help the product. And Vince McMahon saw it exactly that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because of the parallels between you and Lillian. When I spoke to Lillian, she said the same thing. She said when she came in, she had some knowledge of wrestling as a child, but she didn't know who The Rock was. She didn't know who Stone Cold Steve Austin was. So she was thrust into the midst of the Attitude Era without product knowledge. And in many ways, she felt that was probably quite helpful because actually you don't come in with all these preconceptions, I guess, of what you're dealing with. Yeah.
Well, and you don't come in with that. And at least back when I first came in there, it was still old school. And the modern era had crashed into it. Vince was starting to bring people from the outside in because he realized he couldn't improve his product with people that came up through, doing these productions at small TV stations and in high school gyms and teeny tiny arenas. And he had a vision of making it network level type sports production. And they, accomplished that. So, I think that having that viewpoint coming in and it added an immediate legitimacy to it, and it changed. It took a little bit of time, but I've talked about those early days when, if you look at the old arena setups that they used to do, the crowd was not lit up. Everything was centered on the center of the ring with the lighting. You didn't see reaction from fans because they were in the dark. You didn't have, you would have a hard camera and maybe another one, but Vince's vision and the people that he brought in said, let's light the place up. You got to give it some personality. It's just like being at a football game where you see people react to a great play. So he started doing that, and you saw lights in arenas. They blew it up. Then you started seeing cameras on the apron where they're taking you right inside the action. You'd see these guys come in, slam into the ropes and be, 8 inches away from the front of the camera there. and it just blew the world of professional wrestling apart, and for the better. And as you've seen, it never stopped.
Yeah, and what's fascinating is you think that the evolution has potentially stopped, and then the Netflix deal happens, and now it's like a whole new product again. Like you thought it had reached the zenith of its kind of production values, and now it's like, wow, with all these drones and all these graphics, everything. It's like, well, it's like NFL now. It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, and if you look back too, it wasn't as though the WWE was copying what network sports television was doing. It was the other way around after a while. I mean, the WWE, and certainly somebody can check out my facts here as far as timing and whatever, but they were bringing in those gigantic monitors with the monitor boards and then pyrotechnics inside arenas. That was I'm like, what? They're gonna have fireworks inside? They had that stuff going, and so every time you had a pay-per-view, they had to be more spectacular for the next one. And they've been able to do that for how many decades now? So, since the 80s.
It's incredible.
So yeah.
Yeah, and as I said, I mean, you were part of that first SummerSlam. I mean, who would have predicted that almost 40 years later, SummerSlam would still be a fixture? I mean, when you go in for that kind of first night, I mean, that's a really high pressure kind of live pay-per-view to be part of, second only to WrestleMania. What are your memories of kind of that night and the nerves going into SummerSlam 88?
Well, fortunately, I had been at several arena shows before I was thrown out into that one. But as with everything else, you just knew everything was big every time we did something. And this is pretty much the way I've been throughout my career. I'm one of those people that gets very focused and says, this is the job I have to do. And, you certainly have the nerves and everything going on, but you've got a job to do. Mm. And of course, that pressure was there to perform, and it didn't always go great. I always, people send me pictures, especially now because of who's in the White House once again. But one of the first interviews I ever did on the pay-per-views was in
WrestleMania 5.
WrestleMania 5 in New Jersey and Atlantic City. And I did an interview with Donald Trump. And I look at that. That was one of the worst interviews I ever did. I stumbled through his name. I had this stupid earpiece in that was like falling out, and I'm trying to keep it in. And but you get through it. And the bushwhackers came down and licked me to death. And I remember throwing it back to Gorilla saying, Gorilla, you ever have a dog that really likes you? That's what. So Vince had a motto that he would say every production meeting when we had our big events, and it was, nothing can go wrong. He would say that every time. And if you think of it, you're like, you in your head, you're thinking, yes, 1,000 things can go wrong. What are you, crazy? But what he's really saying is, we're doing live television here. You can't back up. You've got to, and I always tell people, when you do live television, you drive without a rearview mirror. You can't go back, and you can't even look at it. It's gone. Bye. Yeah. So you've got to just always look forward. When things go wrong, of course, you got to figure a way to get through it. And, you look at the countless interviews, well, things went wrong, but you never stop, and you got through them. And Vince would say, well, and anybody who's on the other side looking in is going to think, yeah, I think they meant to do that.
Yeah, the fans didn't notice. The fans were just having.
I mean, remember the stuff with Gene when the background fell down and they rolled the wrong tape. It was a pre-tape, and he says, F it. And it was live, but it played live, so there was nothing they could do about it. But that's what was that was absolutely what made it so exciting at the same time. But you were walking a tightrope.
Was that? I can't remember which WrestleMania it is, but where Gene's there going, who's smoking a cigarette? Put that cigarette out.
Yeah,
Like that.
that was I think it was an interview with Randy, and I asked him about that later, and he said because I totally blanked, and that which was rare for Gene to not know where he was going or whatever, and it was just a reaction, but still it was kind of like, where did that come from? Yeah, I remember that. I do remember that, and I did ask him about it later, and he said because I just totally blanked. But see, that was the why another genius of Gene. Gene always had something. You never saw him just totally boot something. It just didn't happen. He was an amazing person.
Incredible team, really, you're a part of, because obviously there's you, there's Gene, there's Lord Alfred Hayes, there's Bobby the Brain Heenan. I mean, what an incredible class you were a part of during your time in WWF. Just great minds.
It really is incredible to think that I was part of that broadcast team, and it's so sad to think that pretty much the only ones that are left are me and Jesse, who's now back on the air, which is wonderful. But yeah, those guys were just phenomenal. Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby, I still think to this day, were the best broadcast team ever. I like Jesse and Vince together. I didn't like Vince with anybody else. I just don't think that, and he certainly worked with a lot of the guys, but I thought him and Jesse were really good together because Jesse could, knock them down. They had a really good dynamic.
Yeah.
And everybody loved the fact that everybody knew Vince was the guy calling the shots, but this guy didn't give a crap. He would just give him the boots the whole broadcast, and it was pretty cool. But Bobby and Gorilla were just phenomenal. And it didn't matter what Bobby was doing. He was just a comedic genius to me. He if he wasn't in professional wrestling, I think he would have been a very well-known comedic actor, because he was just his timing and everything was just perfect, and he was the same when he was not in front of a camera. He was the same guy. So was Gene, and he always kept you laughing no matter what.
What I loved about Bobby, I mean, the chemistry you two had. I mean, he was just always hurling abuse at you, wasn't it? It was always a moody insult.
Yeah.
Every chance he got, it was wonderful.
Yeah, nobody was safe. But people think, I've heard people say to me, did you like the fact that they throw to you and he go, who? And I tell them, are you kidding me? I mean, if you know how wrestling works, that's what they call putting you over. If they don't like you, that's the worst thing. I mean, literally, because they were not going to say anything. They're not going to put you over. Bobby put me over all the time. They actually had me do primetime before they, broke it up when they were doing the boardroom table. Remember when they had everybody that Kurt and Vince and Bobby, and they'd bring in somebody like Hillbilly Jim or somebody. And they literally, Vince had me come in to do a live event center just so Bobby could destroy me. And I loved it. I loved it. It was just fantastic. And when I got the chance to work with him when we did primetime together with the live audience, I loved being his straight man. I cherished every moment, every opportunity they gave me to be next to him and do that stuff. So I knew then to appreciate it. And I certainly do. I have such great memories of the time that we got to work together.
Did you keep in touch with those guys after you kind of left the wrestling business behind?
No, very sporadically. I went into the wilderness and did other jobs, and I think a lot of people thought I left wrestling because I was mad at or I didn't want to do the business anymore or something like that. And that wasn't it. I was married, I had kids, I was trying to do other things, and places I worked, they would not acknowledge that I was a former wrestling announcer, even though people like Phil Mushnick and people in the Post in New York would never let me forget it, no matter what, when I was working at a news organization there. But I was always proud of the work. I always credited my ability and my skills were all developed with the WWE. I mean, I wouldn't have a career to this day if it wasn't for Vince McMahon giving me that opportunity. And Bobby had written a book and had put in the book that, that I had denied wrestling and I turned my back on it. And I saw him years later when he was not in real good health. But I told him, I said, Bobby, I said, that really hurt me, because that wasn't the case. And I said, we had a nice little exchange, a little talk about it. But I didn't think that these guys would want to stay in touch with me. It was kind of a bad misunderstanding between us all. And he's like, no, I would have loved to have heard from you. So, and the same thing, and I was very close with Gorilla Monsoon, with Gino, and missed him terribly. I loved being around him, but when you're not in that world, and then everything else was going on, and suddenly, Bobby was very ill, and then Gino, Joey Morella, his adopted son, passed away, and he was never the same. And so, I wished I would have stayed in contact with them, because I was very close to them, and everybody, we just lose touch. And by the time I kind of came back and I was doing the podcast and everything like that, they were gone. So a big regret in my life is that I didn't reach out to those guys more, but I just felt like they didn't want to hear from me. And then come to talk to them, and like, yeah, like Bobby said, yeah, I would have loved to have heard from you. You could have picked up a phone, and I did see Gene a lot more, because Gene lived in Florida, and I had close friends that I'd stayed in touch with who lived down there as well. And I saw him a couple of times and played golf with him one time there. And so we did. And then also when I started to do a couple shows not that long ago before his death, and I got to see him, and we did the Edge and Christian show together, which is, if you ever get a chance, folks, check that one out. That was the whole premise of it. I don't know if anybody got to see the Edge and Christian show they had on for a while with the WWE network. And the premise was that they were bringing us both, they brought us both in. And we think that we're being brought in because they want us to be the show announcers. Well, it turns out they want us to be the show bartenders, and we're competing to do. And it was just one of the best days to see him again, because we just fell right back into being around each other again. And they had put stuff, because they let them get away with a lot on that show. And I remember I took a picture of the teleprompter where they had stuff like saying like, Mooney, lick my, and, stuff like that. And I'm just like, what the hell? But that was Gene. Gene had that sense of humor that, it was sometimes a little blue. But that was one of my cherished days in life, is that we got to do that show together. And if you ever get to see it, it's pretty funny.
Yeah,
it really is.
I feel like with that Edge and Christian show on the WWE Network, it was like like they were giving creative license to basically live out all their childhood dreams. Like,
we did. They did a show called Moonies. It was we did a whole thing on the. It was a spoof on Goonies. They call it Moonies, where I've lost my pants and we're trying to find my pants. That's like, and we were shot all over Connecticut. They had set up all these things with us, and we shot it all in, I think it took us 2 days. But yeah, it was fun. And being able to go back and do stuff with the WWE, which, I've done sporadically, but it's good to still be a part of it in a sense.
Yeah, because you did, I'm right in saying you did Homecoming in 2005, so that Raw, the USA Network, big nostalgic return, and then you did the show in 2012, I believe. I think that was was that Raw 1000 that you were brought back for? Or
yeah, they brought me back for 1000, and then I've done I did a couple of DVDs, one for them on the Macho Man, and then we did a warehouse bit DVD. And then they brought me back to do the pre-show for the 25th anniversary, and I did with Peter Rosenberg, which is another one. We had a blast. I thought for sure, I said, they're going to want me to do a show out of this, because the whole premise was that, Sean Mooney had been stuck in the warehouse. Nobody knew what happened to me. And I'd been in the warehouse for all these years and trapped. I was trapped in this time warp with all the gobbledygooker and all these things. And Peter is this super Mark who, stumbles in there, and then we wander around and discover all these things. And I take the 25-year history, the top 25 list, because I don't want him to leave. And that thing has gotten hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. And it was so much fun. We just riffed the whole time. The thing was very loosely scripted, and they just let us go. And we had so many things we did that they did a blooper reel at the end because they couldn't fit it all in. And it was great. And I swear to God, I told my good friend there, and I said, "You guys you're going to be calling me, man, because working with Peter, we just really hit it off." And I said, and that is golden. People love to see all this old stuff, and we can make it happen. But they did end up doing a show, but it was like a couple of guys that were, I don't know, historians or something. I was like, I don't think it lasted very long, but that was fun. And then, of course, I've done quite a few interviews that you see in the documentaries that they've got out, that A&E, and even some that are still not out yet, but so it's nice that they value hearing from me every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also it's interesting because, like, obviously they made a joke of it with that warehouse thing, but very few people leave wrestling and like make a total exit from wrestling for a long period of time, and you really did that. You're one of the few exceptions, but literally just one day you were there, the next you weren't for a long period of time.
No, and I did. I disappeared for probably 20 years before. And the way I got back into it was that opportunity to do a podcast, and it just kind of brought it all back to me. And I haven't looked back. I don't do a whole lot because I live in Arizona. It's a little tough. A lot of these shows and stuff are on the East Coast, and it's very difficult for me to get away. I have a full-time job as a news anchor, so I haven't really been able to do that. But I love getting an opportunity, the chance to go to the UK. I haven't done any shows here. They have them going on all the time. I get invited to them, but this chance to go to the UK, and I was going to do it before the pandemic. They had the show over there, and of course everything fell apart. And so I'm so happy that they were able to put this together and then invite me. So it's quite a return for me. I don't know the reaction I'll get, but for me, it's going to be wonderful just to go over there and if one or two people remember and they recall those Coliseum home videos, whoever, that's going to make my trip.
You're going to get tens of thousands of me's, basically. There's a lot of people my age who remember you very, very fondly. And what I love as well is that you're there with your action figures. Mike Chioda will probably be right next to you with his action figures. I love the fact that both of you have now got your own figures, and which sit very beautifully within the Hasbro range. When did your figure launch? That was quite recent.
Well, this all started, Hastel Toy is the one that does it, and it's a combination of Hasbro Mattel is the origin of the company. And Mitch, who runs the company there, saw the opportunity that there were a lot of these tremendous personalities that were very popular, who for some reason were never approached by Hasbro or Mattel, and he took full advantage of that. And now he's got an unbelievable stable of great former professional wrestlers, and they do a great job. And he contacted me, and people over the years had come to me about doing stuff, but they were never really, I thought, really legit, and I just wasn't interested. But I talked to a few other guys who'd had figures done, and they told me, man, they know what they're doing, and they do what they say. And it was about a year process, and they walked me through the whole thing. Every time they did any kind of a prototype or a 3D image, or they sent it to me and wanted my opinion on it. And if you look at these, let me grab it. It's
and he got a Lord Alfred.
And you see up there, they got his lordship, which they were able to put together during the same period of time. Which, of course, we're like English tea together.
Absolutely.
I could not be happier that they were able to put a figure together for him. I wish he was here because it'd sure be awesome if we could return to the UK together. But yeah, they just did a really phenomenal job. I mean, all of the stuff, the detail on it is really good.
With the Mooney salt.
Right. And just the details of, the blue blazer, which was pretty much my trademark. We had, Vince loved putting us in all different colors. Remember the period of time where he had these 3-piece suits he wore, and he had every color of the rainbow. He would, yellow, orange, but we had blazers too that they had for us. And we had gray and cranberry, which Gino liked. Gino always wore that one. But I thought, as the news guy, blue blazer, that's the news guy. That's the serious. And of course we had the WWF logo, and it's not the WWF logo, but it's the gimmick logo, which is from the company, but it's on the pocket, which I love. That's just a cool detail. And then also the tie. I wore, we had a blue and a cranberry WWF ties, which would had WWF stitched into the tie, which I've saved a couple of them. And I know they're great. People love to get a hold of those things because they were originals, never done again. And I also I kept a blazer that I had a bunch of them. I wish I would have saved them all, but I did save one that has the actual patch on it. And I couldn't be happier. I think that they did a phenomenal job. And if you're a collector, there's not a whole lot of these. I'm not, there's not this gigantic demand for, but in a way that's kind of cool because it's a rare item.
Yeah.
And you can pick them up at hasteltoy.com, and that's HASTTEL toy.com. And we're right on the front page there. This collection, I think there's 6 that they just put out. Alfred and I are part of that group. And check them out. I hope that people pick them out and they like them as much as I do.
Absolutely.
It's very cool.
I think they're wonderful.
Finally.
Yeah, finally, exactly. And also you mentioned him obviously there. Lord Alfred Hayes occupies such a special place in the fans of us, us Brits especially. Right there, so seminal to all of those releases that I loved as a young man. Tell me about what it was like to work with Lord Alfred.
Well, his lordship, and I've mentioned many times, there's 2 people really at the WWE that took care of me. Really, I mean, most the whole team did, but if it wasn't for his lordship, who also lived in Stamford at the time, where we were, the headquarters were, and our television studios were there, and he lived in the city, and also Gorilla Monsoon, and Gorilla was up at the television studio pretty much every week or so, and I became very close with him. And, Gorilla is one of those guys, either he liked you and if he didn't, man, you forget it, that you were getting nothing from him. But for some reason, I think he liked the fact that I was very respectful of the business. I was eager to learn, and I knew my place, and I worked my ass off. And I think that he really appreciated that. And Alfred just became a really good friend, and they would counsel me on how the business worked. As I've said, I didn't know a lot about the origins of it, and there's a lot to it, and you don't get in easy. And it took a good year before I was accepted. And in the meantime, I just had to take it. I just had to keep rolling. I had to keep have thick skin and just keep showing up. And eventually they stopped speaking Carney when they came into a room when I was there, And so I was always eternally grateful for his lordship. But besides that, he was just an awesome person, an unbelievable sense of humor. I never heard an expletive come out of his mouth the whole time he was in my life. And that was just because he was a gentleman. The worst you'd get out of him was drat or how unfortunate. and we palled around. That Stamford wasn't a big city, and we'd go down to South Norwalk and have a few pints. And he was just wonderful to work with. And if you look at, he was wonderful to, as far as he could just ad lib with you, he could just improv with you and roll with it because he'd had all that experience. And people don't really, I don't think, know they know him as this English announcer. As far as here in the United States, of course, they know him better in the UK. But he was a very accomplished wrestler.
Yes.
And he was a tremendous heel. And he loved being a heel. He loved being that arrogant Englishman. And he used to cut promos. I've gotten a chance to see some of the stuff where he had the tea, the little teacup with the saucer there, and he'd be steering this and just destroy whoever the opponent was and what he was going to do to them in the ring. You sniveling, rat, and I'm going to, and he loved being a heel. And unfortunately, most of his career with the WWE was as a babyface. But if you'll listen, a lot of the times when we did play-by-play, he got a chance to give it to me. He turned heel a little bit when he would do the announcement, because his feeling was you can't have two guys agreeing to everything.
Yeah.
And that's what you got to have, the balance in the team. You can't have two baby faces doing a match. It just doesn't work necessarily. And so I think a lot of the folks in the UK who got the opportunity to listen to those matches, they got to see the master at his work. They got to see his lordship where he was happiest. And that was when he got to put the boots to somebody. And just an awesome person. I loved Alfred. He was one of my greatest friends. And I remember a quick story when, as I told you, we lived in Stamford together, and Alfred was, this older, refined gentleman, and it was a very affluent area, of course. So a lot of people had nannies that were brought over from the UK, and Alfred had befriended a few of them because he was from the UK and knew the ways of what was going on in the United States, and so he made friends. So whenever they would come over there, these women would contact him, and he was, help them out. I won't go into any romantics or anything if he got involved in that. That's privy, but he had this gigantic Lincoln Continental that Vince had owned when they first moved to Stamford, and then of course as business got better, Vince had a few other cars, the limos and the Clenets, but this car was sitting there, and Alfred asked him, "Are you going to use that thing?" And Vince said, "No, you can have it." So he drove this gigantic blue Continental around that had the doors that opened out, right? And we would have a lot of social gatherings back then, and Alfred would show up with this blue Continental and 8 or 9 nannies in it. And I used to call him the flock of nannies that would be with him. And it was just his thing. He was working it. Yeah. But they would go everywhere everywhere he wanted to go, whatever. And they adored him. They adored Alfred because he was just a gentleman, and that they needed anything, he took care of them. He knew the city, and he was a great friend to them too. And he would just show up to these parties, and everybody would just be blown away because he had these beautiful young English women that just fawned all over him. And I that's one of my greatest memories of seeing Alfred show up at a party. And he would have maybe a white dinner jacket on that he was wearing. And "Hello, Sean. I have a few wenches I'd like you to meet." Of course, he was kidding, but just wonderful. And I miss him to this day. He was one of the greatest people I've ever known, in all walks of life, and the people I've met. I miss Alfred dearly.
Yeah, I mean, I can see how much your face is lit up talking about.
Yeah. Oh God, I just remember that he would always have some line when he'd walk in, and I remember one night we came home. There was an apartment building there that he liked because it was like an old watchtower. I think it reminded him of England. And he had this big studio on, what do they call it when it's like at the top of the floors? And it was just this gigantic open place. And he didn't want to live in a house or anything. He loved that. I think because it reminded him of London. And this was back in the day when you might have a few cocktails and you might get behind the wheel of a car. And I remember after a particular evening, we'd gone out and he had insisted he was fine, that he was going to make it home. And we did a lot of stupid things back then, of course. But I remember that I went over to the Watchtower that morning to get him for something. And I remember that he had parked his car somehow where 3 wheels were in the street, but one was on the curb. I just, it's like it was, and I went up to his apartment and I said, I opened up the window and I said, Alfred, did you see how you parked last night? And he came over to the window. He said, "Dear Lord, Sean, sometime during the evening, someone moved the sidewalk." So,
it's nice to hear that he was exactly the same.
Yeah.
Off.
I think, and that was Alfred. God, he was just wonderful.
What was wonderful was a few years ago, so 2022, I went to Box Park in Wembley, so literally just looking out on the new Wembley Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
Some guys hooked on wrestling had organised a Summerslam 1992 watch party. There was about 500 of us there on a huge screen, all watching Summerslam 1992, and pretty much every single line that anyone uttered, including everything that you said or anything Alfred said, all the crowd was just relaying the words back, because that show is just so indelibly etched in our psyche now that there's not a line, I don't know what's going on, but I know that was very, very rude.
That sounds just like him. And I told you, we talked before that still stands out as, and I got to do a lot of great events, but that show at Wembley had everything. It was just incredible for 1,000 reasons. The first was the fact that it was really our first big show over there, to see how we were being, how the product was being received outside of the United States. Well, we soon learned that it was really, really big. Just getting there. The fact that they had almost 80,000 people in that stadium, I believe. I don't know the exact count, but just the fact that there was. I just remember hearing that noise of the people there, and how the crowds are different than they are here in the United States. They chant and they do. It was like a rugby match. Yes. Yes, exactly. And then, of course, you had all the drama behind it. With we know there were 2 main events, but I don't remember what that other one was. But
that was one,
right? But the Brett and Davey Boy. That was real life drama going on. Nobody knew what was going on with Davey Boy, and there was all these rumors. I've interviewed Brett since, and a lot of it was confirmed, at least through him. Now, Diana, Davey Boy's wife, the family has a different view of stuff, but that just adds to the mystery of what went down. But Brett tells the story of how he really didn't know what was going on with Davey Boy that summer. He tried to get in touch with him, and anybody that knows Bret Hart and the history and how he approached business is that he was very meticulous about everything. That match, he knew what was going to go on in that match, start to finish, had written it up, but he couldn't get in touch with Davey Boy to talk about what he wanted to do, or what, didn't know his physical condition. There was rumors about drug use. There was rumors and then he had that infection in his knee, and then Brett also tells a story of once when they didn't even know if he was going to show up at Wembley that day, and he ends up in England and goes into the ring, and Brett says they lock up and start going, and the first thing Davey Boy said to him was, "I'm fooked." He didn't know because they'd gone over the match briefly, but supposedly Brett says, I had to basically dance him through it. Now, you watch that match, and I have seen it many, many times, and even somebody with the closest eye and the ear of seeing how, how, if you know the business, how they communicate, there's not a lot of that going on. You saw a couple things, but there's no way, unless it was all just muscle memory. That was an awesome match. It was one of the best ever.
My favorite match of all time.
For both of them.
I've watched that match more than any other match in history.
Right. I'm right here. And I remember just thinking, oh my God. And if you remember, I interviewed Diana in the crowd. That was all that tension. And I'd gotten to know them pretty well, the family and Diana. And she was a wreck. She was a wreck for not just her husband, but also for Bret. And there was so much on the line. It could have been awful. It could have been humiliating. It was a worldwide audience. It's in the UK where everybody is cheering for Davy Boy. It could have gone just horribly wrong, and it could not have gone better. And I remember being emotionally just struck. And I remember seeing Diana, and then everybody was crying. And even in the ring, you could just see the relief between Bret and Davy Boy that when when it was over. And so that was, to me, was just a phenomenal event. And then you had all the other backstage stuff going on, all this with the Road Warriors, with the LOD and Hawk disappearing. And it was, to me, it just had it all. It has stood up over the years too, with all these other events that have taken place. But that's right up there with the best ever. There's no question in my mind. And I'm biased, of course, but I think anybody who is a true fan of professional wrestling cannot look at that and not say it wasn't one of the greatest events that they ever staged.
It's the event I've watched more than any other in my life. I never tire of watching SummerSlam '92. But I spoke to Diana recently, and I asked her, because obviously she's not a television personality. That was very much out of her comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I asked her how she felt about doing a live interview at ringside minutes before, and she said to me that you gave her some really helpful advice that got her through that interview. Do you remember what you said to her?
Well, I remember. Fortunately, I had developed a relationship with the family, so I think she felt a little more comfortable knowing that I wasn't going to throw something at her, and I told her exactly this is what's going to happen. But I remember telling her that there's no wrong answer. I just want you to just, like, if you're having a conversation with me, tell me what you would say, and there's a lot going on in your mind. And I said, if you get emotional, that's okay. That's okay. That's natural. So I just remember telling her that, just look at me, and we're just going to, like, you've talked to me a bunch of other times. And if you have to stop, do it again. If you have to collect it, you're fine. I'm not saying, like, we do with it's on tape. I'm just saying, but there's nothing you can do wrong here. And I think that put her more at ease. And she was great. I thought it was, she did a great job.
And the match wouldn't have been,
because it was real. It was real. That's what that was real and genuine. And she wanted the best for two of the people that she loved the most in the world to happen that day. Yeah. And it did.
I think there's another match that you were into. You did the backstage interview for beforehand. And I think it's a match that's a bit of a sleeper that people lose sight of, because you've got the Iron Man match, and you obviously got Montreal, but actually the Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels Survivor Series 1992 match, I think is absolutely fantastic. It's a flawless match. It really is, two guys out there to prove that they can carry this new company into this post Hulk Hogan, post Ultimate Warrior era. And I was watching your interview back today you did with Shawn Michaels. Like, it's just, obviously that's him just on the cusp of breaking out, but he was incredible. By late 1992, he was such an incredible consummate.
Right.
And I loved the
and
you two had as well in that.
Yeah, and had come into his own. And to this day, they are two of the best professional wrestlers I've ever seen. And that match was certainly, you saw two incredible tacticians in there, who, as we've since learned, who didn't like each other. That was very, very personal. Everything that happened between those guys, as we saw what happened, with Montreal and that whole thing. But bottom line, professionals. And when they went in there, they were going to give you everything you had. Sean wasn't the nicest person in the world at that point in time. It took him later till, he found religion and I think had an epiphany about what life was really all about. But you cannot deny with what that man could do in the ring and Brett either. So, they both should get their due when it comes to that. And really, I separate a lot of that too, where I can just look at it and say, how did you entertain me? And my God, those two could entertain you. Oh man. And especially together.
And that's a really healthy way to look at it. Often I just watch wrestling and think you have to take personalities out of it and go, actually, as a product, this is bringing me so much joy, and sometimes not get too embroiled in it. Another thing I wanted to ask you about quickly is, I think this is something that somewhat gets overlooked by a lot of fans, is those event center segments that you had to do in the kind of late 80s, early 90s, where you were kind of syndicating and localizing it for all these local markets. Obviously, we just see the end result. We just see Sean Mooney doing one piece to camera. But as I understand it, you had relentless days of non-stop. Talk me through what a day of event center was like for you.
Yeah, I'll tell you, the event center, prior to the development of that, everything was done at arenas. And Gene would go to, was out there. That's basically where he spent all of his time. He'd go to these house shows and they'd have a film crew in back, and he'd bring the guys in and they would do customized interviews where whoever it was that he had in the interview, whoever it might be, if it was Hulk or somebody, that guy would become part of, telling people that it was going to be happening at Madison Square Garden that Friday. Well, it was, as you can imagine, it was very difficult to do those interviews. So somebody had the brilliant concept to come up and say, why don't we make these superstar interviews, unless it's a really special event, generic, as you saw. Guys would have a storyline going on with somebody else, and that's all they have to talk about. They don't have to say this Friday at this whatever, and we can reduce their load of having to do these interviews. We can put a lot more guys out there to do, get their interviews out, and we'll have an announcer who will do all that. Well, that opened the door for me. That was going to be my main gig. That's what I did. And Gene could not have been happier. So he wanted me to succeed. Not that he wouldn't have taken care of me, but he wanted to make sure I wasn't going to go anywhere because he didn't want to end up doing that. And at one point, when business really took off, we were doing customizing anywhere from 90 to over 100 markets a week. Now, for people, it's really to try and understand how much effort, how much that took to do, how many of those event centers I had to do. I'll give you kind of a breakdown of it. I was in every show, Superstars, Challenge, Spotlight, Primetime, and I customized I did event centers for each one of those. And if you remember, I appeared in the show 3 times, and each one would have 3 hits. You have the intro, throw to a superstar interview, bridge, throw to another superstar interview, wrap it up, catch it this 2 weeks from tonight at the Horizon Center or whatever it was. And I would sit there all day. Now, you can't do a prompter that way. You can't even imagine how much you'd have to, copy you'd have to put in there. So I would have to ad lib all of these. And the way we would do it is that they would just get an 8x11 sheet, and they would write the wherever the venue was, the date, the day, and then the card, and it would go down from the top of the card to the bottom. And they have that with a camera. It was like the teleprompter camera, but all it did was shoot that card. And they would put the new sheet in for each market I did. So that was my only guide. And I'd get, something I was going to say and be able to say that over and over again. But at the same time, I had to hit all of the venue. I had to get the times right. And then we would do them, as you can imagine, that as you got closer, first you'd start out and be 2 weeks away. Then you'd be a week away. And then we do one this Friday night or this Saturday night, whatever it was. So that was just endless. Yeah. the monotony was just crazy. And I remember initially my voice would be good for maybe a couple, 3 months at a time, and then I would lose my voice just from talking so much. Well, my pipes started getting so strong, then I never lost my voice, and to this day, I haven't. I was a little under the weather this week. But I have the strongest pipes in the world, and I credit it from the event center.
I mean, you have to keep your enthusiasm, don't you? You might be reading off.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. You can't give it up, for the Horizon Center, and then boot it because it's, in Santa Fe somewhere. Like you're exactly right. Everything had to be, this is the only one I'm doing, and I'm doing it for you. And I would customize everything where Gene had told me early on, we couldn't do, I wish we had the internet back then. It would have made it a hell of a lot easier, but I would get those travel guides that you'd get at bookstores, and they would tell you where restaurants were or good places to go visit or, great pubs. And I would say, make sure you guys over at Poppy's, I know you're going to be there this Friday, right down the street from the arena. Have a couple of pints and then head on over to the show.
A cheap pot before McFoley. Right?
Yeah, and I had a little notebook that I would save. And if I'd go to a city and we'd go out or something, and I'd meet somebody, the bartender, whatever, Bill, whatever, I would write it down. He's at this place, and then when I did that market, I'd go, okay, there's Jack Sullivan. He runs that place and I'd say, Jack Sullivan's behind that bar. I know he's pulling, And that was Gene. Gene gave me that, and it really brought it home to people. I was that guy down the street. They wanted to have a beer with me too, and that's what I did for the stuff in the UK. So I remember when I went over there for the first time, and we were at one of the bars there at the hotel. Remember, they used to let people come, and they couldn't come really into the hotel, but they would hang out front. And I remember them screaming, "There's the lad!" They called me the lad. And I was just like, wow, that's, just amazing. And then I put it together like, well, I'm the one that's talking to him. Nobody else is really customizing and saying, hey, I know where you live. So it was
in a non-threatening way.
Yeah, it was yeah. Oh, absolutely. But, it was like people putting notes under my hotel room door, and, the security guy get me out the back door. And yeah, I didn't have that. I never dealt with that here in the United States. People are like, "Hey, it's Mooney, cool, all right." But there, it was, whoa, man, that was, it was. I got a small taste of what the rest of the superstar guys were going through, but it was fun. But at getting back to the event center, then you do those markets, and I remember it would be, a Thursday or a Friday. I was trying to get out of the studio. And Howard Finkel, who was the one who kept track of all these cards, would call me and say, and I had the desk where I would sit, and it had a red phone, and it had a little red light on it. And when that red light went on, that meant Howard was calling me from the tower. He'd gotten word that something happened. Somebody hurt his shoulder. Somebody had to go home for a family or something. And I knew when that light, I was like, oh, geez. Because that meant somebody was going to miss their spot, and they had to put somebody else in there. And you know what that meant? Yeah. I had to redo all those markets wherever they were going. And it might be, not only just fixing that market, but the week before, because it was still going out. And yeah, that was brutal. I remember like just getting that phone and just going, no. But I give credit to Howard. He put up with me, but it was brutal. It really was. That's why I love doing all the other stuff. The Coliseum home videos. We had fun. That's what made me keep going, because then we'd go and do a pay-per-view, and I got to be there for all of the excitement of those. Yeah. But that was my main gig, and I understood it, and that's what kept me there.
I think something a lot of people might not realize is actually not only were you part of the very first Monday Night Raw in 1993, but you are actually the very first voice anyone ever hears of Monday Night Raw. It all begins with Sean Mooney. And here you are. Well, here we are 35 years later almost, and Raw is this giant of sports entertainment, now worth $5 billion. And now in 80% of the world's homes.
Yeah.
What was that? That's such a special, that first night, that Monday Night Raw, Manhattan Center, obviously you outside, Bobby the Brain Heenan trying via various guises to get into the building. What was that first night like? And also, how was Raw pitched to you? Because it was such a different thing, wasn't it? For WWF, which
absolutely.
was all about 4 months earlier had sold out Wembley Stadium, was all about how Vince McMahon was, how big can we go? Suddenly goes to this tiny kind of arty Manhattan Center, really intimate, beautiful setting with a couple of 100 fans.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome to be the answer to a trivia question. People, that's what I always hear. Who is the first person to appear on Raw? And that's pretty cool. Back then, I was just doing my job, and I remember that night that I wasn't so excited about being out front and doing that first thing. I was more excited. I was going to work with Bobby, and then what they had in mind, I thought was just going to be hilarious. And because Bobby was going to be in all those different costumes. The premise was that he'd been banned; he wasn't allowed to come to the building, and he was going to figure out one way or the other to get his ass in there. And of course, he came, as the old lady, Rob Bartlett's aunt, and the Hasid Jew with the hat on, and it was just, and I didn't even really know. I had no idea what he was going to do, but I'd worked with Bobby enough to know how to roll with him, and so that night just stands out to me for just those little vignette things we did, those little hits we got to do. And the very end of it is when it show's over, and there's like, let him in, and then it's over. He goes in there, but the people want to ask me all the time. Did you know it was going to be what it would turn into? Of course, honestly, no, I didn't. I thought it was a great idea. I thought, because Primetime had run its course. We'd done many different 2 other versions of it, and they were looking to do something that was going to get people's attention. The Manhattan Center was a perfect place to do it because it was this intimate little arena, but it was more of a theater because those those seats were right up over the ring, and so you got that feeling that people were right there. So it gave them a whole different new feel to it. There was a different electricity to it than being in an arena. So that really is what stands out to me. But you didn't know back then, what was going to happen with it, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then, of course, suddenly decades had gone by, and we were celebrating 1,000th episode, and then 25 years, and now it's still going. So I'm sure at the time that even Vince had no idea what was going to happen. It was going to get become as big as it became. But like everything else, there's more than one story just besides Raw of things that the WWE developed and have become lore in the history of professional wrestling. That Vince is responsible for all of that, and so it's Hulk Hogan, who, if those two people wouldn't have existed and somehow collided together, we wouldn't be having the conversation we're having right now. So it all started there, but everything evolves. And now Vince isn't part of it anymore. Now, I would have never thought. I thought that when he decided that he was going to retire, whatever was going to happen, that would be it. It might keep going for a little while, but without him, it couldn't be sustained. But Endeavor didn't become a gigantic entertainment conglomerate for no reason, without knowing how entertainment works. And now they're doing better than ever. The stock has never been higher. So who knows what's next? Now we know it's changed. It's gonna continue to change. But the personalities are very different than the people that were stepping into the ring in the 80s and 90s and beyond that. It's a whole different world now. But it's like anything else. If people like what you're entertaining them with, they will keep coming back, and people keep coming back.
Yes. Well, look, we all of us always enjoyed how you entertained us, Sean, and there's a lot of questions I could have asked you. We haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg about everything you've done.
Well, I'll have to come back.
The world of wrestling. So you have an open invitation to come back onto Wrestling Life. The last question for today is, obviously, you've got your brilliant figures to sell, and we've talked about those. Yes. Obviously, coming for the love of wrestling. How can my audience keep up to date with you on social media? What other channels that you're using these days?
Well, there's Primetime Mooney, which is we have an X account and Instagram. But also, if you want to email me, you can email me at primetimemooney@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. I'm tossing around ideas. I don't know. I'm not going to be. I'm getting to the point where I'm ready to step out in front of the camera from doing news, but I know that I'm going to continue on. I still love to do creative things and love the world of professional wrestling and see what the opportunities are out there. I've thought about maybe bringing the podcast back in a bit of a different vein. But I'm kind of waiting to see what happens.
Primetime got me. I have to say this. Primetime got me through so many long car journeys with a huge smile on my face a few years ago. Yeah. Hearing you and Jim just sharing memories together and all of the conversations you had on there was just wonderful.
Yeah, it was. Hacksaw was fantastic. Thank God. I don't think I would have really launched it without him because I didn't know that much about the world. And then I kept thinking, like, well, anybody want to hear from me? So, Hacksaw only did about 20 episodes or something with me, but because he did so much, it was just very hard for him to even put something aside a week because he was doing all these appearances. But I kept it going. I just thought, I'll go week to week and see who I can get to talk to me. Well, I ended up, we did about 200 episodes. And talked to pretty much everybody that I could find that were around during my era. I've got to talk to other people that I never had the chance to, who worked for other operations and organizations. And also when I did some work with the NWA, met some great professional wrestlers that were with that group who have now gone on to do great things. I became very good friends with Nick Aldis. Yeah. Who is one of my favorite people, not just favorite professional wrestlers. We've become very good friends, and I'm so happy for what's going on in his life with his work with the WWE. I've always thought he was a tremendous performer. He's a great stick man. I mean, he's great promos, so he's in a really good spot. And he could still do it in the ring too. And I hope they give him a chance to maybe throw a few people around, but
it's gonna
it just gave me so many opportunities and opened up my world again. But I have a full-time job too. I mean, I'm a news reader and on doing 4 shows a day. So it got pretty tough to do it. But like I said, I'm thinking maybe when I'm going to semi-retire at least from that world, but I'll still be out there. So I hope folks get in touch with me, and we'll see what happens. But I have a feeling I've got a few more things to do.
This man is not done yet, but we are done today. So there will be a Sean Mooney part 2. This is happening. But we've reached the end of the episode for today. So I just a couple of things to say. I'm very grateful, obviously, to you, Sean, for giving up your time today and for such a wonderful conversation. Thankful to my producer, Jeff Easter from Tall Lake Productions, who always brings Wrestling Life to life. But most of all, thank you to this wonderful audience who has sat with us for this conversation today, a little trip down memory lane. So that's it for today. My very special guest has been Sean Mooney. This has been Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, so be good to each other. Pay it forward if you can. I'll see you all soon. Bye.